He reached into the van and untied her, and for a long second the world held its breath. The afternoon sat like a pale coin in the sky, hot and indifferent, when the little boy appeared at the curb, small shoulders hunched under an oversized hoodie, hands clenched as if holding on to the last pieces of courage he had. The street was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses into your ribs, and when Cole March, weathered, tattooed, a man whose life was written on his arms, saw the boy, something old and soft in him stirred awake. The boy's eyes were wet and raw with a wordless plea. He stumbled out the story in ragged fragments about a sister taken near the park, a dark van, 2 men. Cole listened the way only someone who had learned to hear the unspoken could. The cadence of fear in a child, the small, panicked rhythm of a heart too big for its chest. Around him the others moved like muscle remembering bone, silent, watchful brothers who wore scars like badges of survival. Their engines were cold for a heartbeat. Then, as if summoned by a promise older than the law, they roared to life and the quiet street split open with sound. The boy was lifted and fastened on the back of Cole's bike, his fingers finding the leather of a vest like a tether to hope, and they were gone. Formation tight, engines an oath that sliced through the suburbs, curtains trembling as the thunder passed. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Loom. The ride was a film of motion and precise danger, weaving through traffic with an instinct born of years on the road, listening to whispers. From contact people who watched corners and tails. Marco, a wiry rider with coffee-stained hands and a map of the docks in his head, had eyes everywhere. His call came like a bell, black van seen by Route 9, heading toward the old industrial lots. The docks smelled of salt and rust, sun-bleached pallets and old secrets, and when the convoy pulled into the gravel lot the engines died and the air thickened into a different silence. The van waited near a loading bay, its doors a hair ajar, and from that tiny space came the thin sound of a child's cry, the sound that rearranged every man there. They spread like shadow and purpose, boots whispering on concrete, the group moving with an unspoken choreography that depended on trust and a lifetime of knowing how to be unseen until the right second. Cole approached the van as if stepping into a prayer, every tattoo and scar a map of battles survived, and the 2 men who emerged from behind it froze into the shocked posture of those who had not expected mercy to be so close and so relentless. Within heartbeats the kidnappers were disarmed of their bravado and left with eyes that had nowhere to hide. The van yacht opened to reveal a girl who might have been 12, wrists bound, hair sticking in frightened clumps, and when Cole reached in there was a tenderness to his hands that surprised even him. He worked the knots like a man undoing regrets, careful to be gentle, and when the bindings fell away the girl's face crumpled into disbelief and then relief as if someone had flipped the lights back on inside her chest. Liam, who had followed the story from the curb, sprinted forward and wrapped his arms around his sister with the fierce, uncomplicated devotion only a child can have, and for a moment the whole group was silent, the roar of their engines replaced by the quiet sound of 2 siblings breathing each other in again. The police arrived as the dust settled, blue lights painting the corrugated walls like a wash of cool color. The bikers stepped back, not seeking credit or headlines, simply allowing the law to take the formal lead while they kept a respectful distance. There was no swagger in their posture, only the aftermath of exertion and the sheen of sweat and dust on leather. People who had once assumed there were only 2 kinds of men in the world, saints and sinners, found themselves watching the gray between, where men who had been written off as monsters became the keepers of something as small and stubborn as hope. Cole stood by his bike, the sun leaning toward evening, so that everything took on that long, cinematic light that softens edges and sharpens truth. He replayed the boy's voice in his mind, the smallness of it held up against the enormity of what had happened, and an old ache settled in his chest. an ache that had less to do with glory and more to do with the quiet knowledge that sometimes the world is held together by those willing to act when others look away. As they rode back through streets that now seemed to recognize them, windows opened and hands waved, faces eager to offer something that felt like gratitude and a little bit like apology for not always seeing. The mother met them at the corner, tear-wet and stumbling, clutching her children like a relic newly recovered, and she mouthed the word that bridged strangers to saviors. "Thank you." It was muffled by the distance and the wind, but the message landed where it needed to. In the cooling light, Cole watched Liam run into his mother's arms, Zoe standing between them like proof that the night could be chased away, and the men's silence turned into a soft, private contentment. The kind that comes after danger when the blood slows and the heart remembers why it had to beat so fast. They cleaned their bikes, lined them up in perfect, quiet formation outside Cole's house later that day, and sat in the shade without boasting, the kind of peace that is not loud but deep as the ocean. There was a tenderness in how Cole smiled then, a small upturn that belonged to a man who had been hardened by life but not made cruel by it, who knew that armor can be chosen and that softness need not be weakness. He thought about the boy's whisper on the sidewalk, about the way a single voice can alter the direction of a day, a life, a group of men who had decided long ago to live by a code that sometimes meant riding toward trouble instead of away from it. The sun slid low and the sound of engines faded into the distance, a lullaby of chrome and thunder, leaving behind a quiet world that felt a little safer because of the leather and the roar. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment, and tell us where you're watching from so we can appreciate you.